Progressivism is a societal cancer. Oh, hi there. Welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Now, over the weekend I bumped into yet another special snowflake who was whining about the untold amounts of harassment that she allegedly gets on the internet. She was, of course, unwilling to cite examples, but eventually ended up complaining about me and a few other folks who were allegedly harassing her because we dared to disagree with her on a topic. Mind you, her presence on that discussion was entirely voluntary. Now, after I was done rolling my eyes over yet another pansy whining about words on a screen, I started really thinking about the topic. And I'm very serious with this. This video is not satire. So I thought, does internet harassment really exist? And after applying common sense and basic logic, I've come to the conclusion that it really does not exist. Now, allow me to explain. For the overwhelming majority of the people on this planet, harassment implies coercion. That is to say, one cannot escape the actions that constitute harassment or is compelled by superior forces to endure them. For instance, let's say you work at a job that feeds your entire family and you get constantly harassed by your boss. Now, sure, you can quit the job, but that comes with a much higher risk to yourself than enduring the harassing behavior from your boss. Such a situation is rightly recognized both by the market, which tends to sanction the behavior through boycotts or, in extreme cases, by drops in stock prices, and by the law, which deems such acts as transgressive to societal norms and thus subjected to penalties. Another example, let's say you make conscripted civil work, which is something that is still a daily reality for millions of men across Europe who must do some shitty job for the state in lieu of military service. And whilst working that particular job, one of your colleagues insults you gratuitously or multiple times a day and every day. So let's say, for instance, calls you a moron every day because potato. Your colleague is there voluntarily, but you're not. You attempting to leave can end up in jail time for you, or more likely into a hefty big fine. In such situations, you are essentially compelled by superior forces to endure, and as such, the behavior of your colleague is definitely harassment. Now, I think that what I've said so far is pretty much uncontroversial. I'll be very surprised if anyone disagreed over what I just said. Now, the controversial parts come when we try to apply the same logic on the internet. The internet is as close as we got so far as a human species to a free space. And by free, I don't mean gratis, but free as in freedom. Like a freedom alternative to other spaces. Now, let's have a look at the legal definition of harassment. The definition provided by the Legal Dictionary over at thefreedictionary.com is satisfactory enough for our purposes. And it says, quote, harassment, noun, the act of systematic and or continued unwanted and annoying actions of one party or a group, including threats and demands. So, right from the definition, we see that unwanted or annoying words of one party or group is not enough to constitute harassment. It also needs credible threats and demands. Now, some of you may say, but Lucian, it doesn't say credible threats in the definition. Well, yeah, it doesn't, but if I threaten to send you all into outer space, or if I threaten someone that I'll use my wizardly powers to make them hallucinate, good luck convincing a court to convict me of harassment or to take my threat seriously. In the real world, a threat needs to be reasonably credible in order to be taken seriously. And the threshold for a reasonably credible isn't really that high. But the problem of those who claim internet harassment exists, for those who claim that internet harassment actually exists, is that most of what they call harassment and or threats doesn't even meet that low threshold. Okay, so let's now take this knowledge and apply it to the internet whilst still keeping an eye on those pesky things called liberties and personal responsibility. An already seeded example of alleged internet harassment is that when a person, usually a woman, expresses an opinion over the internet and is called a cunt because of that. Now, I personally have zero empathy in such cases. I've been called a cunt, a Nazi, a fascist, a faggot, and all sorts of other names in the last 20 years since I've been hanging around on the internet. But let's assume that being called a cunt on the internet is serious business. Okay, let's assume that. But just because you don't like it doesn't mean that it meets the criteria for harassment. Well, the answer to that question is a resounding no. On the internet, as opposed to the streets or the workplace, you have options. Besides the obvious option of disconnecting your computer from the internet, which would be preferable in some cases, there are also other options, such as close the window and don't read, grow a thicker skin, use the block, ban, or delete button, or reply with your own curses. None of these options are available in the examples I gave earlier in this video. You can't just block a co-worker or your boss, and you certainly can't ban your boss. You can't just close the window and ignore in the conscripted civil work example. Leaving the premises is also off the table. Another reason why almost all internet harassment claims are bollocks is, and certainly don't meet the criteria for harassment, is the fact that threats made on the internet are rarely credible, and as a result, the demands made under those threats can simply be dismissed. For instance, let's say someone emails me and says that if I don't make a video lauding communism in the next 48 hours, he will dox me. Now, that sounds serious. The problem is that it's an empty threat. What can you dox? My face, my full name, and the city I live in are public knowledge. My actual address doesn't really exist in electronic format, so at best, if you try really hard, you can find one of my older addresses. And that's the worst case scenario. The most likely scenario is that the one doing the threat is just trying his luck or is trolling. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that internet cannot be used to conduct harassment in real life. Of course it can. The internet is a tool at the end of the day. Especially if you're so stupid that you keep nude photos of yourself in the clouds, for instance, or you publish your address multiple times. But my compassion is also non-existent for those people, because at the end of the day, it is their fault for making the material available. And yes, that's me blaming the victim. Watch how much I care. Speaking of which, I'll soon make a video upholding the notion that blaming the victim is in quite a lot of circumstances a very good thing to do. Prepare the outrage and prepare to be offended about that. Anyway, so to sum up on this harassment business, whilst there are indeed ways to use the internet to harass someone, the idea of internet harassment is entirely ludicrous. People disagreeing with you on the internet, people leaving nasty comments on your videos, people trolling your server, as it's happening routinely with my chat server, or even people following you around social media is not harassment, not even by a long shot. People used to understand this a while ago. Every public personality of the past simply assumed that once he or she becomes a public figure, there will be people who will disapprove of his or her actions or performances or whatever. It's the nature of the beast. If you want to be a public person, you also need to understand that there will be people out there who disagree with you. Crying harassment won't help, and in fact it will incite even more. Take for example Gamergate, which exploded into a now over 1 year saga because instead of discussing the issue put forth by the consumers, the public persons decided to cry harassment and misogyny and tried to silence any discussion. The thing called the Streisand effect exists for a reason. The more butthurt you act and cry foul, the more of it you'll get. The least shits you're willing to give on disagreements, the less you'll get. So yeah, that being said, don't forget to subscribe so I can offend you more, and please visit the Patreon page and support this channel so I can afford to offend you not just more, but also more often per week. Oh, and if you want to get Twitter PTSD, follow me on Twitter at FreedomAlternate. Thanks for watching.